Okay, Hawaii Real listeners, today I have Sam Mangakahia. He's the artist and he does tattoos for guitars and ukuleles, so to speak. Today we're going to talk about his technique and how he does that, but he's also going to delve deeper into what motivates him and what cultural aspects that he takes into putting together all the art pieces that he does for these guitars and ukuleles and other objects and stuff like that, which include going back to genealogy and history and legacy of the person that is actually embodied and imbued in these instruments. It's really important stuff and it's really cool. Stay tuned.
I think the best way to find out is by acting, is by doing what you think and feel is right, and doing things that gives you life. And when we follow our passions, it's honestly a scary process. It takes a lot of courage to follow something that we feel born to do. And maybe you're like, well, I don't even know what I'm born to do. What is my purpose? And I can guarantee that you can find this out if you search for it and if you ask for it.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Hawaii Real. If you haven't yet, subscribe to this episode on YouTube. You can also catch these episodes on my new website, HawaiiRealPodcast.com. Again, HawaiiRealPodcast.com. You can go there and you can actually listen directly on the website to all the audio versions of this podcast. You can also hear the audio versions of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. And the website, I also post all these short clip videos from the episodes called Hawaii Real Shorts. Today, I have the pleasure of having with me a new artist, up and coming, but he's Maori. He's not actually from Hawaii, but he brings this beautiful, beautiful art into some of the Hawaii instruments and ukuleles and guitars and stuff like that. Samuel Mangakahia. He's the owner of HAMIORA and ShakaTribe.
That's it.
ShakaTribe.
ShakaTribe.
The website for that, ShakaTribe.com?
ShakaTribeShop.com.
ShakaTribeShop.com and HAMIORA.com. That's HAMIORA.com. You can go and check out these beautiful guitars. I'm looking at it on my phone. I'm like, dude, this is like, you put like these Polynesian tattoo type things onto guitars.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much for coming on to Hawaii Real, man.
Hey, thanks, man. It's a pleasure. It's kind of cool.
That's good.
It's for first podcast, but I'm excited.
And ladies, he's got that Australian accent, New Zealand accent.
A bit of a mix. It's kind of weird, but
kind of weird. So, you're here in Hawaii. You're from Australia, but your family's from New Zealand. You're part Maori.
Yep.
And you're here going to school at BYU.
Yeah.
What are you going to school for?
Yeah, so I'm currently, I graduated.
Oh, yeah?
Finally. After 4 years, I finally graduated.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations. It's quite the feat, but I came to school to study. Originally, I came because of my cousin. She studied here and she performed at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And so I was like, wow, this will be a cool opportunity. And I was into art at the time and basketball. So my ultimate goal was to play on the Seasider team that they had.
How did that go?
Unfortunately, they actually stopped the program.
Oh.
The first year I was in, so I tried out. It went well, but they're like, hey, we've picked the teams already. Good try. And, with my height, I'm just 6 foot. And so it's like, we have enough point guards. So I was like, well, okay, quick change of plans. As every entrepreneur experiences, you got to pivot. And so what I did was, okay, I'll focus more on my Polynesian roots. I'll focus more on my art and something that has been kind of inspiring for me. And I think that was a really crucial pivot in my life, to recognize that from basketball for 7-8 years. This is my passion, my love. And then it kind of shifted over to art. And I think that was a very important shift. So I studied graphic design,
Mm-hmm.
and I a certificate in entrepreneurship, and then lastly a minor in oil painting.
Ooh.
Yeah,
So
just
how long have you been an entrepreneur and doing your own business?
I think if I can remember, ever since I was little, I always liked the idea of making something and selling it, and then, being compensated. And I think the first thing that I remember doing, because I loved basketball at the time, was buying new basketball shoes, wearing them, and then eventually, after my feet grew, I would sell them on eBay. And so I sold maybe 30, 40 pairs, as a 9-year-old on
Wow.
eBay.
Yeah,
And
because most people just give them away.
yeah,
or
it's like, oh,
donate
I'm
them.
done.
Yeah.
Let's throw it out.
Right.
I was like, no way. I need this money
These
back.
are worth something. I'm going to sell them.
So I was like, wait a minute. Mom can buy the shoe and then I can sell it and get money. So I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I'm getting money for free. And then after that, different things like I found some bamboo sticks at the back of the house. And I was like, what can I do with these? I'm kind of bored. So I cut them up and then I sanded it and made napkin holders.
Wow. How old were you when you started doing that?
It was around the same age, 9, 10. And so ever since little, I always had this sort of strong desire to make stuff happen. And I always wanted to be involved in something, doing something, building something, making something. And so it kind of began around that age. Yeah, 9, 10.
So what got you more into the mode of doing more Polynesian type artwork?
Yeah. So when I was 15, we moved to, so at the time when I was doing that stuff, I was in Brisbane, so east coast of Australia. We moved down to Melbourne, which is a lower state, and I lived in the city at the time. And I think it was around 2009 when ukulele became super, super popular. And with that, I was like, I want to play. And so I picked one up at the store. My dad, he's actually a performing artist. And so he teaches cultural stuff like dance. He performs at schools. And so part of his workshop was to teach the ukulele.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had a bunch at home. And I was home during the school holiday one time. And I picked it up and I was like, this kind of looks plain.
It does, you're right.
It's just a normal uke. I was like, okay. So I went into the kitchen, picked up a butter knife, and I was like, let's scratch some design that I've kind of grown up around. In New Zealand, we have a lot of these patterns that we have, whether it's on keychains, bags, clothing. I kind of always seen this design, and I recognize that, oh yeah, that's from New Zealand. That's kind of my heritage. And so with the butter knife, I just scratched in this design, simple design, and took it to school. And basically the rest is history.
Well, what did your dad say when you did that?
Yeah, he's like, oh, okay. He was very supportive.
Oh, okay. He wasn't like, what the hell are you
He's
doing?
like, what the heck? This is what I use for my school. No, he was like, oh, that's awesome. Can you do it on a few more?
Nice.
And I think that encouragement was key because our whole family's artistic. And with that, I've been able to sort of incubate this desire and cultivate this desire in me to produce art and share it.
I think that's huge for a parent to be supportive of their child when their child is doing something that could be perceived as like graffiti or like breaking something or ruining something, but then in the child's mind, it's art.
Yeah.
And if the parent can see that and support that, now here you are, and you're an entrepreneur now.
Yeah, it's crazy how that one simple thing sort of led. And it's like at the time, I didn't really recognize what I was doing. I just did it. And I think that's a strength that I have, is just doing it. It doesn't matter if I'm, is this going to work? Isn't it? I just do it anyway, and then see and adjust and kind of gauge reaction of people and what they think and what's important to them. And so with that ukulele experience, I took it to school. And my friends were like, hey, can you do this on mine? Because for some weird reason in 2009, ukulele sales went from like 200, like let's say 100,000 units per year worldwide to like 500,000. And then from 500 to 900, some weird thing happened. I don't know. It just tripled in sales. And so that's exactly when I started this customization. And I was creating a website for free. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I need to make stickers. I need to share this with everyone. And looking back, I'm like, wow, those designs, man, they were struggling. It's definitely come a long way to this point.
So what's the method that you guys use for the etching and everything?
Yeah, it's developed from, I used to use a Dremel, well, actually a knife, and then that was a bit like I was destroying the ute too much. So a bit more controlled. I used the Dremel, and the Dremel was so hard to hold. It was like shaking.
Really
powerful, and it didn't have enough control. And so after that, I was like, I need something different. This was after like 4 years of doing it. And finally I went, actually it was last year, I went on an internship, and I did an internship with a famous artist. His name is Rangi Kepa. He's a Maori artist, amazing individual, definitely a character. And so he used a dentist drill to do his work. And so from that point, I was like, hey, I need something different. So I used dentist bits, dentist drills, everything of the sort. If you think about when you've been to the dentist, it's loud, but it's not like a jackhammer into the ground. It's like a high pitch. The thing rotates insanely quick, which enables me to cut through the material, whatever I'm using. So like if you can see this necklace right here, this is Korean. So Korean is like a resin and stone mix. And so one technique that I learned, that's his technique. He told me specifically, he's like, this is my technique. I'm like, okay, I'll still use it though, because I want to, move culture forward anyway.
Right.
So he dremels and creates lines or cuts into this material, and then fills it with resin and creates this sort of color change. Almost looks like a moko or a tatau into the surface of this Korean. And so with that idea in mind, I was like, yeah, well, when I subtract or take off the surface layer on the instrument, it has a similar effect. So sort of like a permanent effect into the piece. That's the long answer.
That's the long answer. Okay. But I think it's really interesting that you started using a dentist instrument to do that. So the artistic stuff that you do is very similar to the Polynesian tattoos. And we were talking off camera before we started. One of the reasons, and you don't have any tattoos,
no,
because of your religion.
Yeah, it's a big reason. Yeah,
right. And we were talking, is like that's actually a really interesting blend where you're taking like ancient culture of the ancient Polynesian culture and your roots from ancient Polynesia, and then you're taking your modern beliefs and religious morals, but you're combining them.
Yeah.
And you're doing the tattoos type patterns on important objects now, not necessarily on people's bodies.
Yeah. So with it's been a decision that I've made early on, and it hasn't been an easy one, especially in the sort of the realm that I'm in this artistic cultural realm that I'm in. So my faith is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a lot of people know that as Mormon. And with this faith, we believe in Christ, and we have certain principles that we live by. And I guess, well, one of them is the teaching and the idea that our bodies are a temple. And so with that in mind, I've always been conscious of sort of understanding that and respecting that value. And for me, it's actually been a big blessing. It's helped me to be in situations or places where I feel light and I feel wholesome. And I think it's not easy to find that, especially with a lot of these different distractions that are happening in this life. In the same token, I respect and I love moko. I love ta moko. I love everything, the design elements or tatau, whatever, tattoos, whatever you call it. I love this aspect, and I do it on instruments. I draw it on t-shirts, on bags, on hats, on everything that I see, my laptop, my headphones, everything. And so I still respect and I love the artwork that it is and the message that it shares. But for me, I think it's important, it's a personal decision to stay true to that. And so I don't design tattoos. I don't do them. I know how to set it up. I know everything, all the new gadgets and things that help make a clean line, because I'm just obsessed with clean lines, And so I think that's helped me to keep my faith and then also perpetuate culture in a positive light.
Yeah, because you're kind of filling a niche right there too, because you have tattoo artists out there already doing tattoo work and doing Polynesian tattoos. Not too many people, and with the guitars and the ukuleles that you can see on your website. That's the first time I've seen that.
Yeah,
I've never seen that kind of detailed artwork on musical instruments. And you're telling me the reason why you don't see too much of it out there is because it's not easy to do.
Yeah, I think with it's weird. First off, it's just weird. Like who scratches something into the instrument that's worth like $5,000? Like that's the first question people ask, is like, what the heck? He's defacing an instrument. Why? And I started on $30 ukuleles, like mahalo color ones that didn't really carry that sort of value. And what I found is over time, people are very attached to their instrument. People love, like they make this connection with it. And it's just, if you have one, you got to have another one. And that other one has its own sort of personality. And so what I've done is I've figured out a way to cut just enough off the top without affecting the soundboard on the top of the instrument, which is essential for sound. And so obviously the cheaper the instrument, the less hurt you feel when you see this cutting action. But I've done it on $600 guitars. I yet to do it on a Taylor. I want to do it on, a Martin. But I think with that, I would almost want to collaborate with the manufacturers and sort of incorporate my designs with the integrity of the soundboard and keeping that sound crisp, but with the same cultural pattern. Yeah, there's so much to it. I could go into it for like hours on end.
All right, so the markings in the tattoo, I'm calling them tattoo. What do you call them? The patterns that you put?
You can call it tattoo.
Okay, so
I call it moko.
Moko,
yeah.
Moko on the instruments that you do. It's not just a pattern that you're doing. You're not just doing a pattern. There's reasoning behind it. There's history behind it, and there's actual motivation behind each pattern that you're doing. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I think the best way to explain this would be through a recent piece that I did. And I don't know if you know, but an artist in the Mana'o company, the lead singer Kaulana, sadly he passed away several months ago. And Kolohe, also known as Roman, I actually did a piece for him kind of describing his story, and he played it on stage as a tribute. And so Kaulana's daughter reached out to me on Instagram and said, "Hey, we love that guitar you did for Roman. How do we go about getting this?" Because they wanted something that would represent their father, Kaulana, and his story and the things that were precious to him. And so Auntie Lisa, Kaulana's wife, reached out to me, and we had a phone call, and I was like, I'd love to do a piece for you. What is your story? Like, how many years were you together? How many kids do you have? Where did Kolana come from? Did he come from, like, he came from Hilo? He grew up on the Big Island. He loved fishing. He loved diving. He loved being, in nature. And so I gathered all of these pieces that are precious and important to us and these memories, and I started sketching on the iPad, and I developed this design that basically began from certain aspects that are important to them, and then eventually came around the guitar, and finished off with where he is today, resting in glory. And so it's a very emotional experience, and this was done on a takamine, so a guitar that Auntie Lisa gave to me to do it on, and it was his, and he performed with it, and it had history already. It had this one sort of scratch in it where they wanted to hide it, and so I was like, yeah, that's great. I can kind of work a design into that to disguise it and make it basically beautiful and something that can capture your whakapapa, your genealogy, something that you can tell your grandkids, your mokopuna, and be like, hey, this is grandpa, this is his story, and tell it through cultural symbols that we've lost, cultural symbols that we need to continue to reflect on and pass down for generations. And so it's a little difficult to explain it just with words, and so that's why I use symbols. And I think they can carry so much more mana, so much more meaning to the recipient and then to the generations to come.
I think that's super, super awesome. That's like the only words I can bring.
Yeah, thanks.
That it's not just a pattern. You're not just drawing art. You're putting legacy and history and genealogy, which genealogy for Native Hawaiians and Maori is it's deep.
Yeah.
It's so deep, and that you're bringing these instruments to life and you're giving them character. That's, I mean, I hope more artists can see that, more local artists and Hawaiian artists, and I don't know, maybe even Native American artists. That, I mean, the horizon is endless in that respect, where you can go and just do so much in that realm.
I think with this one piece that I did for the Kolana, the Pakele family, I should say, it was, so I've done I think I've done 11 guitars up until this point, and 383 ukulele. And so I started to number them because my uncle's like, he's a bit of an entrepreneur. He's like, hey, you should start numbering your pieces. And I was like, oh, shoot, maybe I should.
Yeah.
And so I started numbering them, and hashtag 300, hashtag 301. And so I've kind of kept this bank of pieces that I've done, and I take photos and document it. And it's really, really cool to look back on, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's that person, or that's this. That person, and this is their struggle and trial. And the piece that I did for Roman, one of the most sort of significant parts of the design for him was a piece that represented his friend, and his friend passed away, I think, from drug overdose. And I was able to capture that memory of him on this piece, and for him that means everything because he was very close to him. And I, as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure it's a drug overdose. Either way, it represents his friend passing away, and I think for us to capture that memory is super important, to remember who we are and where we came from. And like you said, it's important for us to tap into that.
One of the questions I usually like to ask my guests is, what is your life philosophy?
Yeah. Okay. That's a big question.
It is.
I love it. We only have 12 minutes, but I think, what is my life philosophy? I was thinking about this actually on the way up to this studio. I was like, okay, he's probably going to ask, What's your goal in life? Or the philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I can maybe describe it like this. I exist to inspire connection, culture, and innovation through, I'm just going to say Polynesian art, but through whatever I create and whatever I share in this life. And I've chosen those three things, connection, culture, and innovation, because those three things have helped me have happiness and helped me have purpose and helped me to overcome obstacles and basically live a happy and content and fulfilled life. So the first one is connection. Connecting to people, connecting, like, for example, in Maori, a famous sort of proverb is, what is the most important thing in this life? And it goes, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, like kanaka is tangata. It's the people, the people, the people. And for me, connection with people is the most important thing, because that's basically what we're going to take with us into the next realm. We're not going to take anything else. No monetary sort of gains, nothing, not even the creations that you make. You're going to take your skills and the memories. And it's those connections that truly matter. And I think that's how we have happiness and lasting sort of relationships and peace. And there's a lot more to that one as well. I think connecting for me with my Heavenly Father, with God, is essential for my sort of overall happiness and well-being and peace of mind. Like I said a little bit before, there's so many distractions, there's so many things that this life offers as a counterfeit for happiness. But I find to be truly happy, connection with God, connection with people brings that. There's no question about it. And I think you can go down a certain route forever and constantly look for this happiness, but you will not find it unless you make those connections. That's just what I think. And that's what I believe. So that's connection. And we have 9 minutes. Okay. So the second thing is culture. Culture is basically, if you're not creating culture, it will create it. You will become whatever is around you. And so I think we need to be actively engaged in creating a positive and progressive culture. Culture, I believe, is there for us. We are not there for it. And I think when we understand this, we can be so much more patient with people. We can have more aloha. We can share things that are sacred to us, and they can receive it. It's not like, no, we need to keep this for us. This is ours, very exclusive. The one saying that I really don't appreciate is selective aloha. I just don't vibe with this at all. I see it on cars. I'm like, man, we're all in the same waka. We're all in the same canoe, paddling together. I think the more we realize this, the less COVID cases we'll have, the less fights, the less racism. As we see people for people and who they are, I think we can be not selective, but we can be open and transparent and just love people. Sounds simple, very definitely not. But it's a constant battle to be aloha living every day. When someone cuts you off, you say whatever and you're like, stuff you.
Well, it's one of those. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it.
Exactly.
They're not doing it because it's easy. They're doing it because it's hard.
And so culture is definitely, it gives us purpose, identity. We need identity. I can see it in the youth today. There's so many youth that don't know who they are, what they're doing. And so they resort to all sorts of hurtful and abusive things that it's difficult to see. And it's hard when your family members are engaged in this and you're like, okay, well, what can I do to love and support them despite these actions? So I think culture can help us find our purpose. And then lastly, innovation. And this is what it means for me pushing culture forward, pushing the boundaries of what we think is cultural and traditional. It's like back in the day, it's like, oh, if you're using wood, you're good. If you're using a chisel, you're fine. If you go outside of that, that's not traditional. This is not culture. It's like, wait a minute. Our ancestors, they used whatever they had. If they had a CNC, if they had a laser machine, if they had like a tattoo machine that could create intricate designs, they would use it. I'm sure of it. And so I think moving forward into this modern age, we need to be aware of that, but use it for good purposes. I think what becomes difficult to navigate is this mass-produced culture of items that you see. And I think when our intentions and when we try to perpetuate culture in a positive way, then that we can be true and innovate rather than destroy and desecrate.
I thought it was really great that you brought up that part about if our ancestors had, Dremels or actual tattoo guns and stuff like that, they would have been using those. Yeah. They wouldn't have been sticking around with a chisel and hammer and stuff like that. They were, fishbone. Like, no, if they had technology, they would have used it.
Yeah.
So that it's the work that is produced. It's not necessarily always how the work is produced.
Yeah.
That is the cultural practice. Not to say that the cultural practice of bringing back and continuing on the ancient artwork and how it's done should always live. And I think that there's always a place for that.
Yeah.
But I agree with your sentiments too, that, dude, if the ancient kings and queens had, technology that we had, they would have been using that. They would have been using, the ancient, sticks and stones kind of deal. They would be using the things that we use.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like what you also said is there is a place. And I think what's fascinating and impressive to me is that they were able to use tools that, if we use today would be almost not impossible, very difficult to achieve what they achieved with that specific tool. And I'm very impressed with people. Like I still use chisels, I still use wood, and I'm creating carvings and sculptures in that sense, but I do recognize there's other tools that we can use. So I'm not saying, because I know this is a big debate, and it's like, well, what is he saying? He doesn't know anything. And honestly, I'm not a culture expert, and I don't call myself one, but I do recognize there's a need and a time and a way to use what we've been given, what we've been blessed with, and to innovate. And I think innovation means life. We, like as human beings, we always want to innovate and create, whether it's improving a little bit like every day, whether it's in our workout schedule, like how can I get this edge? How can I eat healthier? How can I think sharper? I mean, that's why we're listening to podcasts. And that's why I love this podcast, is because it's like innovation. It's bringing cultural and important aspects to the forefront and saying, this is what we believe in now. How can we improve? And I think that's truly inspiring, and we need to do more of this.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
There's no ancient way to do a podcast.
Yeah.
Sorry. We've got to innovate. We've got to bring it to the modern forefront and push, because my whole thing is, pushing the culture.
Yeah.
Like bringing it up and expanding it.
Yeah.
And, that this is the world we live in. That we live in a digital world. So
that's it.
Sam, thank you so much for coming on. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners? Oh, one question I wanted to ask. What do people call your type of guitars when an art is done? When you do art on a guitar, what is that called? Or what do people say? Hey, your guitar is such and such.
Yeah. I guess you can call it, this is a guitar done by, so my art name is HAMIORA. HAMIORA is the name of my fourth great grandfather. And it actually means Samuel in English. And my mom's like, no, with a last name like you have, Mangakahia, we're going to call you Sam or Samuel. And so I go by Sam, and I've decided to call my art like HAMIORA. And so this, you could call it like, oh, this is a piece done by HAMIORA.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This is a HAMIORA piece.
Right.
And so, yeah, you could call it that.
Okay. All right. The HAMIORA.
Yeah. So as far as like last words, there's a lot of last words that I have. But I think it's for listeners out there who are, thinking about, what is my purpose? What am I doing? I think the best way to find out is by acting, is by doing what you think and feel is right, and doing things that gives you life. And when we follow our passions, it's honestly a scary process. It takes a lot of courage to follow something that we feel born to do. And maybe you're like, well, I don't even know what I'm born to do. What is my purpose? And I can guarantee that you can find this out if you search for it and if you ask for it. And that's why we have mentors. And for me, one of those, a big mentor of mine is actually God, praying to him. And not only God, but people around you, business owners, kumu, our elders. You could go to a random on the street and, just strike up a conversation and ask, what is their story? So with that in mind, I'll finish on that.
All right.
So
I have to have you on again, man.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens in 10 years. I don't know. Maybe I'm still here.
All right. All right, everybody. As always, stay happy, Hawaii. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, bro.